Okay, so I'm recording now. So this is the customizing iOS wallpaper, the new feature that we added in 14.10. Um, I think it's likely super helpful if you have a stack of iPads and you're not quite sure which one's which, and you want to just easily figure things out about the device even from the lock screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through how to configure it and what you can show on there. And you'll be able to use this really easily. This shouldn't really be a long session, but sometimes it's good to just walk through it and have a recording of it. Okay, okay, so with that out of the way, let's go over here. So there is this knowledge base article, and I will copy the tiny link and paste it over in our chat, and I'll include it with the YouTube video. Um, there's a KB article that walks you through, what you would do, and it's really just making a profile that has a command policy, and in command policy, you'll see an option to pick a wallpaper, to pick the text you want in there, to pick the position and the color of the text, and I'll show you this in FileWave. Um, you can also use variables, and this applies to more than just this feature. So this feature takes advantage of something that actually exists for other kinds of profiles. Like if you create a profile to set up like exchange email on an iPad, you can actually insert variables like percent email, I think it might be. Although if I ever don't know, there's a KB article over here where it shows you all the different variables that you can use in macOS and iOS profiles. So I'm going to share that one too, because if you haven't looked at it, it might save you some time. So we pick the image, we pick the text. So enrollment user. So off the top of my head, it's a good question. I always find myself looking here because I always hate to say yes if. So
I think
it
it's
should
something like
be.
auth username.
You can see it in, well, I should show the way that you can see it, right? Because I think you can take advantage of anything by percent and then the variable, right? So if
Yes.
I go to a inventory query and I make a new query and I say that I'm going to look up enrollment, and then I mouse over it, it's percent auth underscore username. So then you can try that out and see that it should inject the value there. So, for anything you look up, this internal name that's the trick of it. This is the internal. So let's say, did I want to find? Maybe it was. No, I don't know what I was looking for there. Um, like if I want to look up model. Actually, model number is interesting, although that would change every day. But you could see something that was very far off. But anything, and you can use custom fields names as well. Custom fields for sure, because if I have to think of one of my custom fields, or if I just go to all devices and I go to custom fields, uh, this one would be percent BitLocker underscore key, which doesn't really apply to an iPad. But there might be things like school that they're assigned to, the role, whether it's teacher or student. For instance, kind of a cool thing might be you probably, if you have a proxy server, you might have different rules with the proxy if it's a student versus a teacher, or maybe teachers don't go through a proxy and students do. So being able to show the role, if that custom field was what you used to dictate that, would be helpful on screen, because then you could see, okay, I would expect this device to either be going through the proxy or not. School is helpful because if you're at school A and it says school B on the device, well, that would explain why your inventory was a little off, and that device was physically not at the school that you expected. So, and like Tony said in chat, LDAP fields as well. So, okay, so we can use those, and you can use those in other profiles too. We inject them both for macOS and iOS. This feature we're talking about today, specific to iOS, but inserting the variables is something you could do for Mac and iPad, iPhone. Yeah, you can inject. So it's a short article and it's more fun to show. I'm going to wake up my iPad, and I probably have to pick to send it to my display again. There we go. So it should show in a sec. There we go. So in this case, you can see that the device name is showing here. And it'll show here, I set it so that it's on the background image and it's on the lock screen as well. If I was to lock it, that's the only, yeah, no, it works. On the lock screen, you can see it's there. Now, one thing to think about, and this image is a good example, is think about the placement of the text, the color of the text, and the background image. Is the background image such that you won't be able to read the text? So let's see how I came to make this, right? So I have some images, like I have this image, right? Now, when you pick images, there is kind of an important note, and it's here in the KB article. You have to use images really that are in the right resolution, right aspect ratio. Otherwise, what can happen is when we stamp the text on the image, you actually might notice that the text isn't there. But it isn't that it isn't there. It's that it's outside of the screen's display. So just make that. If you do something and you see I can't see my text, then think about the aspect ratio and resolution of the image. But these are super easy to make, and I will show you how to make it. So I have a couple of examples here. So I have my beach one applied. I have two others that I can apply. And the way that I made them, I'll make one from scratch just so you can see the process. But here we go. Profile. Now, I have to give it a name. So I'm going to say wallpaper D presentation. Right? So every profile gets this sort of general section, and then you give it, a payload of sorts, right? So I know that this is a command policy. And this should find it pretty quick. There it is. iOS command policy. Now, command policies will execute when you assign them to the devices, and then they execute like every once a day. So these are helpful for things that you want to reinforce like over and over. So the thing to think about though is I'm going to change the wallpaper. We're going to go through doing that. But there's the potential, if I only make this profile and assign it to a device, somebody could change it. And then in theory, a day later, it get changed back. But I'll show you a trick so you can prevent them from changing it. So if I do, I can pick lock screen, home screen, or both. For demos, I tend to do both because, then I can show what it looks like, in both ways. I'm going to pick this image that I had downloaded, which I think, nope, I wanted to do this one that I didn't have yet. So I'm going to pick the image. You get sort of a little preview so you know you picked the right image. Then there's this text overlay. Now you don't have to do text. You could just have an image, but it's super helpful to get things like, you know, like percent, maybe serial number, I believe it is. And if I'm ever not sure, then it's easy to go here and see because some of the common ones are written here, you know. And then I could also look in FileWave like I did before to find the internal name if I wasn't sure. But serial number appears to be right. You put the percents on either end. I can even mix, so I can say serial like that. Um, so I can mix text. I can say the size of it. I will tell you that on my iPad, let's see if Air Server went to sleep. On my iPad, I've been tending to pick the largest size text, and this will connect. So this is the largest size. And if you look at this, this would be the big setting. I think small might be too small. You know, I guess play around and see what you want to have here. But I found that big is, you know, easily readable by my old eyes. Then you want to think about like the color of this image. So you can pick, you know, do I want this to be brown? You know, whatever would read well on the screen. So it'd be really easy to see. And then you think about the position on the screen. So let's say I've been tending to put it in the bottom center, but let's put it in the corner there. And this is the only thing I really have to do. So just this section. The other bits of this policy are for other things. So I'm going to hit save. And now what I'm going to do is, because I did already have associated my beach wallpaper, I'm going to delete that association. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to create an association. And I'm going to create it with this iPad. And then I'm going to update model. And we'll take a look at how this plays out. And I'll even rotate my screen so you can see how the text would shift. Okay, so I go to clients, iOS, this guy. I'm just going to kick things along by making him verify a little faster. Maybe while I'm waiting, I can rotate it so you can see kind of stays in the center there because originally I had that bottom center. So that orientation and location should be, and a student photo over a background image based off auth username. So no, right now we can only insert text. So any of the variables that are for text. And here you can see an example where maybe the biggest size was a little, you know, the placement was a little questionable. I think I picked to put it in the corner. So here it doesn't work out well. Here it doesn't work out well. But maybe if I change the font size, you know, then, you know, that might be better. So if I go back here and I go to associations, maybe I'm going to delete this association and use another one of my file sets. I'll use this nice one. I'll show you an example of kind of a more plain one that
Yeah,
I
the
did.
text overlay, the way it actually works in the background is it's not actually part of the MDM framework to be able to do this text overlay. So what we do with it, we can just set a wallpaper. That's actually all the Apple MDM can do here. So what we're doing is programmatically taking that text, evaluating it for each and every single device, generating an image of the text, and then overlaying that image over the wallpaper that you provide. Now, what that means, like in this case when Josh applied it to this wallpaper, is it means that when you overlay the two, it is dependent on the resolution of the image that you're choosing for the wallpaper. So large and or big and small don't necessarily, they're not always the same. It's a factor of what size of image you're using too. So that's why I was saying it's
Hmm.
always good to test.
Yes. And yeah, so you'll play with the font size, you'll play with the position. Um, there is one quirk that I believe is getting addressed in the next release. There's still sort of one thing, is that, and Tony, I tested this last night, so I think it really does work the way PN says, that when you send one of these profiles, and you'll make changes, it can be very difficult to make it send an updated version of the profile in less than 24 hours. It wants to only send it every 24 hours. So one cheat that you might use in testing, and you'll see me cheating this way in this presentation, is that I might make a new profile that has the same image and just different settings and then apply it, because then when I'm quickly trying to figure out what I want to have show, um, then I can test that really easily. Like, this was a profile that I hadn't used since yesterday, and you can see here's the text. I had said to put it in the middle on the left. I said to use the medium font size, and so sorry, that keeps timing out. Uh, you can see here, it's really right up against the edge. I'll say on my actual iPad, you can tell that this is a D, and it's very readable. So definitely test with images and text size and placement to have it how you want. And if you find that it won't refresh, just cheat and make another profile, with the image. Once you're in production, you've decided what it's going to look like. You're not really changing that profile, really. So that whole 24-hour thing is not a big deal. And I believe that in version 15 that we might be doing something to cause that to happen more often. In there's other scenarios, like if I wipe this device and reissue it, then it might take a little time before the wallpaper hits. So you'll see that as you go to test. But the other thing is, what if your students or teachers or employees, if you're not a school, what if they like to come in here and change the wallpaper? Well, in here, you'll see if I type wallpaper or start to type it, I don't have the option to. So what I wanted to show you was that if you use restriction profiles, like I do, you can actually take away the ability to change the wallpaper on the device itself. These profiles have been working, but the person using the iPad can't change the wallpaper, which is probably what you want if you want to enforce a wallpaper. And all that is, so if you want, this is just a restriction payload, and the particular thing, it's so much easier to search and look for the red. Let's see, does it turn red? There we go. Allow modifying the wallpaper was removed. The one thing about restriction profiles is when you set this, I'm assuming a lot of people with iPads are using restriction profiles. You have to think about all the checkboxes, that everything is the way that you want, but you can definitely take away this permission, and the feature still works that you can set it through FileWave. Um, and in the chat, there was a question about line breaks, and no, we don't do line breaks in there. That would be an interesting idea. It would make the complexity of text placement a little bit more so. But in version 1, you just put a single line of text, and it can contain words and variables. Okay. So really, for configuring, there's whether you want to consider the restriction profile to prevent them from changing it themselves, and then making a profile one or more. In my case, I have four, right? I have four just because I have four different images, right? But maybe there's a different background image for high school versus a middle school. You want to have the background image represent the school they're at, which you could definitely do. And then you can insert whatever text would be helpful, especially on that lock screen, to be able to tell which device it is just by waking it up. And I'm just going to skim the chat just to see what I may have missed. Unless, Tony, is there anything we should talk about that's in the chat?
No, nothing. Nothing that I can think of.
Okay. So it is a pretty simple, and it in my testing, everything's appeared to work. And the generating the images for each iPad and sending those, yes, yes. So uh, a question was, can we just create the images ourselves for each iPad? You actually, so this wouldn't be a practical thing necessarily. If you had 10 iPads, I could imagine making 10 customized images, 10 profiles, where each profile picks one of the 10 images and assigning them to your 10 iPads. But um, for instance, the school I worked with yesterday has 15,000 iPads, so that doesn't scale very well. That's why this programmatic method scales really well. You pick a single image, you assign that to some number of devices, and you can insert dynamic text. Um, well, so as far as image creation programmatically, so okay, if you had something like you had some script that used image magic or something to generate a collection of images, and then programmatically created the profiles in FileWave, perhaps using the API, since I know in FileWave Anywhere you can make profiles, so you could programmatically create them, but you'd end up with, let's say you had 10,000 devices, you'd end up with 10,000 profiles. That would be the only way that you could do it in its current form. There's not there's not like a hook, for instance. Well, and as far as where do they get placed within that profile. So in the data folder on the server, every payload or file set keeps all its stuff together there. So it
And,
should
and if I'm
be.
not mistaken, I think it's actually handled as a base 64 string.
Oh, right, it gets encoded, so you don't see the image itself, but the string. It would it would probably be for Jomo that's asking. Um, it would probably be easier if you wanted to do something programmatic like that to use the API to create individual payloads and associations or deployments, I guess, because it would be in anywhere, or use the command line for the FileWave Central, perhaps to create them programmatically. But it would create individual. It would be more overhead, I would think, than the current way that we have something intelligent that grabs the image, the encoded image. And no, no, you. It's not a matter of just putting it in the specific place. The profile has to exist as well. So, but that is, I don't know, the concept of being able to have images that assign. That's a step more complicated than this initial feature, but we do something, I guess, similar. If you look at like Apple Classroom, the stuff we do where you can have like student images, there was a question earlier about student images, where there's naming to figure out how they get assigned. Some future could have something like that, but it would be a tad more complicated than what we have now. So I guess, the dream would be to put student's photo as the background based on auth username. It would be an interesting thing to be able to do that, just like in the Apple Classroom part of preferences, where you can say that student images are associated, because then of course, uh, especially with little kids, you could have them just look at the lock screen and immediately Jimmy knows that it's his iPad, or Jane knows that it's hers. Be an interesting thing. Um, as long as they could read, though, you can print their name. But I get that pictures can be good. There can be some problematic things with showing a student picture, especially on a lock screen, um, where depending on your school district and where you are, there could be just a more political concern, you know. Uh, Folks will sometimes get upset about things, so I would definitely make sure like everybody would be cool with that in the school district if I was doing that. In a corporation, that idea doesn't necessarily fit in as well. That seems like more of a school district thing where you'd want to show the face. So, but definitely an interesting idea. Okay, so
I'm curious just on the use case for the for showing a student image or any other custom image like that. What's the how does it help with management of the device? Is it just about matching up the device to the student?
Jomo, if you could say in the chat, or you can raise it if you want to chat in voice. Either way. While they're typing, I was thinking of my little one, and when they first got started with computer class, they had iPads, and I could imagine that, being able to see his face might have been easier before he was really able to read much. Um, but I wonder if that's what the use case was here. Teachers take photos of their students and save them as the background on the lock screen, so when they pick them out of the cart, they know whose iPad it is. So in that case, well, as long as they know the student's name, then text can work. But I do get that seeing a face is an easy identification. So at the very least, with the feature in its current form, you can print the student's name. As long as you store that in a custom field in FileWave, you can um, display the serial number, which is helpful for troubleshooting. Um, and that, yeah. Oh, and Christy said the for just that reason. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, and I can, to make this more helpful in the recording, I can have the text of our chat here. Maybe I'll make it wider because hearing just me and Tony's a little harder. The text stuff on the lock screen, but the text is tiny, is also addressed with this feature because you can choose the different text sizes. And if you see even on the biggest that it's tiny, then think about the resolution of that image. It may be that was a very high resolution image you're using, and you might want to reduce it so that when it gets displayed on the iPad screen, the text is the appropriate size. That would be an easy change to make.
Yeah, I think the issue is that you can set that lock screen message, just as the default part of the profile, but that's actually why we released this feature because it's so tiny and unreadable.
Yeah. And that is a sort of a consideration, right? So getting more stuff on there with variables, but without line breaks, might not fit. I would say that maybe a good idea. So text in multiple locations you can't do because even if you might imagine that you might make two background profiles, only one's going to apply, or I should say one will apply and then the other one will apply. Um, it would be interesting to be able to have different text boxes for different positions, and then we stamp it, in different places. That would probably accomplish what you want. I would say, maybe as a reminder, I will go here to the KB. So if you come over here to the knowledge base and you go to product management and you go to product suggestions portal, you may want to go here and just submit your idea, of how you would see it being better and why it would be better. But I could totally see where if I go and edit this, I could see where we have a single text box that has a single position. I could see it being interesting to put serial number up top, the assigned user here, the grade level here or something, to be able to use those multiple positions, um, with the same sort of stamping idea, but I guess there would have to be per a field for each circle. Makes the UI a little more complicated, but um, that would leverage the existing way that we do it and give you the ability to put things in 9 places. Although keeping in mind, if we did that change, something here might step on this spot and this spot. So you'd really have to think about that if we were able to do that. But that product feedback portal would be a good place to send feedback about that, and also the line break idea. If you go to the knowledge base and I will take this link, copy tiny link, and I will paste it in here in the chat. And that's the product feedback portal links. It would be good because that'll be seen by Tony in particular, and so you can explain sort of your use case, how you see it, and then he'll be able to collect that and think about how that might fold into future versions of the product.
Yeah, the more detail and use case, the better.
Yeah. Okay. If there's no other questions, I mean, I think it's a pretty straightforward feature once you've seen how to do it. Um, I think if you go off and try and do it, then, here in chat, you can ask questions, like in the normal Discord channels. Um, there is like an iOS channel, for instance, or just ask in the general. Anything's fine. And if you run into a thing that you think is a bug, it's not working as expected, support can help you. I've been testing this a lot, and I think just about the only thing that you may run into is if you're doing a lot of testing, changing the profile over and over, then you may see that it doesn't want to send it again in less than 24 hours to your device. But the way to get around that is just make a new profile, put in the same image with different text settings and position, and send that, and you'll see that goes right away. And once you get finalized on what you want, then you're good, and that 24-hour thing is probably not an issue. Um, and I believe in FileWave 15 that will be a non-issue too. It's just the way command profiles work is that by design they go every 24 hours.
And I will mention, since we're here anyway, that next version of FileWave will allow you to duplicate a profile. So you'll be able to just duplicate the one that you have and reassign.
One step easier, yeah. So, okay. And so, yeah, Christy on the line breaks, submit that. Jomo, if you could submit your idea about, that you have, because it's clear you have this idea about the images, and if you can just describe exactly what you'd want, and um, yeah, and if anybody's currently doing any kind of background image anywhere else, or you have some idea that you want to make an image that looks like what you would wish could be done, you could even message me, like the image here, or Tony's on here in Discord. You could send it as a message, and then we'd have a copy of it. Because I don't think Product Board lets you do attachments, right? It's just text in there, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I don't think it does attachments.
Yeah, but you can message us here with an image. If you send it to me, I'll get it to Tony. And there's this question on the cloning. The new one, so in currently, you'd have to just make a new one, right? Or there is the option to export and then import, which creates a duplicate basically. Um, but in the FileWave 15 idea of cloning, it will just be duplicated and won't be assigned to anything, I believe, from what I've seen. Um, so the idea is just to make a duplicate, but it doesn't assign to all the same things. The duplicate.
It would be unlikely that you'd want to duplicate a profile and assign it to exactly the same devices. But if you did that in say using a file set group or something, or it's done in or you add it to a deployment, it'll be the same. You know, you
It
can
would
just
only be
do
for
it.
this. For that 24-hour thing. But in 15, I believe that PN said that you won't have to wait the 24 hours because even though command policies want to wait 24 hours, I think he was thinking of how he could get around that. So this little workaround that I have of just make a new profile and send it out. I think in 15 you won't have to even think about that. So, okay. So then we could probably wrap this up, and I'll get this recording posted in case anyone needs to see anything of it. And I'll include the links that I shared in the YouTube video as well. Okay, so I'm going to